I spent most Tuesdays at the community library. It wasn't anything heroic. Mostly shelving returns, helping people find the local history section, and occasionally showing someone how to print an email attachment. Quiet work. The kind that leaves your feet sore but your mind calm. That evening was like any other. I walked home slowly, carrying a canvas bag of books someone had donated. The sun was already sliding behind the roofs along Maple Street. When I reached the garage, something small caught my eye. There was a second lock. The old one, the one that had been there for decades, still hung from the latch. But above it, bright and new, was a heavier lock drilled directly into the metal frame. I stood there for a moment, just looking at it. Inside the house I could hear the television murmuring. My daughter-in-law, Carla, was in the kitchen when I came through the back door. I set the canvas bag on the counter. "There's a new lock on the garage," I said. She didn't look surprised. She kept rinsing a plate. "Oh, yeah." A pause. "That's to keep you out of our stuff." She said it in the same tone someone might use to explain where the spare towels were kept. Practical. Uncomplicated. For a second I watched the water run over her hands. The kitchen smelled faintly like lemon soap. I nodded. "All right." That was all I said. She glanced up briefly, maybe expecting something else. But I just picked up the bag again and carried it to my room. Later that night the house settled into its usual quiet. My son worked late shifts at the hospital, so he wasn't home yet. Carla had gone upstairs. The television eventually went dark. I sat by the small desk near the window. From there I could see the top of the garage roof. It struck me how easily a house can change while still looking exactly the same. Rooms shift purposes. Drawers get reorganized. Someone else decides where things belong. It happens slowly enough that no single moment feels important. But sometimes something small, like a new lock, makes the change visible all at once. After my husband passed away 8 years ago, there had been a long list of practical decisions. Paperwork, insurance, property forms. At the time my son insisted I shouldn't worry about any of it. Still, I had handled certain things quietly, mostly because grief makes people overlook details. Back then those decisions had felt administrative, not emotional. Before going to bed, I wrote a short note and placed it in an envelope. I left it on the kitchen table. The next morning I woke early, as usual, habit from years of opening the library before anyone else arrived. The house was still dim. I made tea and sat at the table for a while, listening to the kettle cool. Carla came downstairs about 20 minutes later. I heard the garage door open. Then close. A few seconds passed before her footsteps returned, faster this time. She walked into the kitchen holding the envelope. The new lock was gone. In her hand, the metal bracket that had held it looked freshly unscrewed. She didn't speak immediately. Instead she opened the envelope again and reread the page inside. Her face had gone pale in a way that wasn't dramatic, just drained, like someone realizing they'd misunderstood something important. Finally she looked up at me. "What is this?" Her voice was careful. "It's a copy," I said. "Of what?" "The property notice." She unfolded the letter again. The document was simple. 2 pages printed on the letterhead of the small property management firm that handled inspections for the neighborhood association. Near the top was the address of the house. Below that, a line identifying the homeowner. My name. Another paragraph explained that structural modifications, locks, barriers, restricted access points, could not be installed without the homeowner's written authorization. It also mentioned that a routine exterior inspection earlier that morning had already recorded the additional lock. Carla blinked. "They inspected early," I said. "Around 6. They report that kind of thing." "Sometimes." She stood there very still. The letter also included a phone number and the name of the property manager who had handled the file for years. He had been meticulous after my husband died, making sure every document was filed correctly. At the time, I'd simply let him. Carla set the bracket from the lock on the counter. "I didn't know the house was still in my name." She hesitated. Wes? I nodded. It always has been. Silence filled the kitchen again. Outside, a delivery truck passed slowly down the street. Carla rubbed the edge of the paper between her fingers. I wasn't trying to. She trailed off. I didn't finish the sentence for her. Instead, I took a sip of my tea. When your father-in-law died, I said gently, there were a lot of decisions to make. Your husband was grieving. I handled the paperwork so he wouldn't have to. She looked at the document again. I thought. I know. The thing about authority is that it doesn't always need to be announced. Sometimes it just sits quietly in a folder for years until someone assumes it isn't there. Carla folded the letter slowly and slid it back into the envelope. I'll put the old lock back, she said. You don't have to, I replied. She looked confused. The garage has always worked fine with one. Another pause. I suppose it has? She left the bracket on the counter and went upstairs without another word. A little later, I gathered my bag and walked back to the community library. The morning air was cool and clear. When I returned that afternoon, the garage door looked exactly as it always had. The original lock hung from the latch, slightly rusted, unchanged. Inside the house, everything moved normally: dishes, footsteps, the television humming softly in the living room. No one mentioned the letter again. But something subtle had shifted. Not loudly. Not triumphantly. Just enough that when I passed through the kitchen, Carla stepped slightly aside to let me through.